There are stories in Scripture that feel almost too human to be sacred. Stories where the hero does not rise to meet the moment, where the chosen one turns and runs, where the man who heard the voice of God decided, deliberately, that he would rather disappear than obey. This is one of those stories. His name was Jonah. He was a prophet, a real one, not a fraud, not a pretender. He had spoken the word of the Lord before. God had used him. And then one day God spoke again, and Jonah ran. Not away from an enemy, not away from danger. He ran from God himself. And here is the question that sits at the center of this entire story. A question you may have asked yourself in a different way, at a different moment in your own life. Can you actually escape from God? What follows is not a children's tale about a man and a fish. It is something far heavier than that. It is the story of a prophet wrestling with obedience, with mercy, with the terrifying width of God's grace, and losing control of every single thing he thought he understood. Stay with this, because this story does not end the way you expect it to. To understand what happens, you first have to understand who Jonah was and what kind of world he lived in. The book of 2 Kings tells us briefly that Jonah the son of Amittai was a prophet from Gath-hepher, a town in the northern kingdom of Israel. He had already prophesied under King Jeroboam II, a prophecy that came true. This was not a man without experience. He was not unfamiliar with the weight of divine instruction. But nothing in his history could have prepared him for what God was about to ask, because what God asked was not just difficult. For a man like Jonah, in a time like his, it was an offense. The word of the Lord came to Jonah the son of Amittai, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me." That is the command, 5 words of direction, 1 sentence of explanation. Nineveh. If you do not understand what that name meant to an Israelite in the 8th century before Christ, you cannot fully feel the weight of this moment. Nineveh was the capital of Assyria, and Assyria was not merely a foreign nation. It was the most feared empire on earth. Assyrian warfare was documented even by its own scribes as deliberately brutal. Cities were burned, populations were deported, conquered peoples were publicly humiliated and destroyed. Israel itself would fall to Assyria within decades of this moment. The trauma of Assyrian power was not abstract for Jonah's people. It was existential. Nineveh was the heart of that world, a great city, so great the book of Jonah describes it as a 3 days' journey to walk across it. It was a center of power, of wealth, of the kind of wickedness that built itself into architecture and called it civilization. And God said, "Go there, speak to them, call them to account." For a man of Israel, this was not a simple missionary assignment. This was being sent to the enemy. This was being asked to care about people you had every reason to hate, people whose nation had soaked its hands in the blood of your kin. That is the context. Hold it, because it explains everything that comes next. But Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. 1 sentence, no hesitation recorded, no argument, no negotiation, no crying out to God for clarification. Jonah simply turned and went the other way. Tarshish. Scholars have debated its exact location for centuries, but the meaning in the text is clear. It was as far west as a ship could take you, the exact opposite direction from Nineveh. Nineveh was east, deep into the continent. Tarshish was beyond the sea. If God had pointed east, Jonah pointed west. If God said, "Go toward the danger," Jonah ran toward the horizon. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare, he boarded, he went down into the ship. Notice the language. Down to Joppa, down into the ship. This descent language is not accidental in the Hebrew. It tracks Jonah's spiritual direction as much as his physical one. He is going down, and he will keep going down before this is over. Why did he run? The text does not tell us here. It waits. It holds its answer until the moment Jonah himself finally speaks it. And when he does, it will be one of the most startling confessions in all of Scripture. But for now, we are left with the act itself. A prophet of God boarding a ship going the wrong direction, deliberately choosing disobedience. There are moments in life when you know what God is asking of you, and you look at it squarely, and you go the other way. Jonah is not unique in this. He is only more honest about it, because his story was written down. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea. The Hebrew word used there is not gentle. It is the word for throwing, for the kind of force you put behind something you want to strike a target. God hurled that storm, and the sea became so violent that the ship threatened to break apart. The sailors on this ship were professionals. These were men who lived on the water, whose lives depended on reading the sky, who had survived difficult seas before, and they were terrified. The text says each man cried out to his own God, plural, because this was a crew of different nationalities, different religions, every man calling on whatever name he had been taught to call on when death was close, and they were throwing cargo overboard. In the ancient world, cargo was wealth. You did not throw it into the sea unless you believed you were going to die. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship and had lain down, and was fast asleep. Asleep. In the middle of the worst storm these experienced sailors had ever seen, the man whose disobedience had caused it was sleeping. There is something almost unbearable about this image. Some commentators have suggested it was the sleep of a guilty conscience, the kind of heavy, dissociating unconsciousness that falls on people who have done something they cannot undo and cannot face. Others simply note the strangeness of it. Whatever the cause, he was unreachable while the world came apart around him. The captain found him. What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us, that we may not perish. There is bitter irony in that moment. The pagan captain is telling the Hebrew prophet to pray. Meanwhile, the sailors decided to cast lots to find out who was responsible for this catastrophe, and the lot fell on Jonah. The lot, a method of determining truth that the ancient world used when no other evidence was available, and it landed exactly where it should. They came to him with questions. Who are you? Where do you come from? What is your occupation? And Jonah answered, I am a Hebrew. I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. I fear the Lord, the God who made the sea. And the men were terrified, because now they understood. This was not a storm sent by some minor deity. This was not random weather. The God who made the sea itself had sent this. And this man, this sleeping, fleeing man, was the cause. They asked him what to do, and Jonah said, Pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you, for I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. He knew. He had known all along. The storm, the lot, the captain. None of it was a surprise to him. He understood what was happening, and he told them the truth. The sailors did not immediately obey. The text records that they tried to row back to land. They fought the sea with their oars. They did not want to throw a man overboard if they could help it. But the sea grew worse against them. And so they cried out to Jonah's God this time, asking that they not be held guilty for innocent blood. And then they picked up Jonah, and they hurled him into the sea. And the sea stopped raging. The men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. The first people in the book of Jonah to genuinely respond to God are not Israelites. They are sailors from foreign ports who began the story calling on their own gods. By the end of that storm, they were offering sacrifice to the Lord of heaven. Jonah intended to disappear. What he produced, before he even reached his destination, was a boat full of converts. God works in directions we do not choose, and the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. That is exactly what Scripture says. No more, no less. Not a whale, though tradition has preferred that word. Not a sea monster, a great fish, appointed by God. The language is specific and theological. This creature did not happen to be in the area. It was sent. It was prepared. It was the next step in a plan that Jonah's disobedience had not interrupted. You cannot read past this moment carelessly. Jonah had run. Jonah had been thrown into the sea. By any natural logic, the story should have ended there, with a man drowning in the dark water, disappeared, gone. But God had not finished with him. 3 days, 3 nights. In the darkness of that place, in the silence beneath the surface of the sea, with nowhere to go and nothing to do, Jonah finally did the one thing he had not done since the word of the Lord first came to him. He prayed. The prayer in chapter 2 is one of the most raw, intimate confessions in all of the Hebrew Scriptures. He prays from inside the fish, from the lowest possible place. And he begins not with begging, but with testimony. I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. He is using the past tense already, speaking as if the rescue has already happened, as if faith is pulling the answer backward into the moment of the cry. This is not the prayer of a man who expects nothing. This is the prayer of a man who has remembered something essential. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Notice what he says. You cast me, not the sailors cast me, not the lot cast me, you cast me. In the depths of his crisis, Jonah recognized the hand of God, even in the thing that felt like punishment. He understood that God had been present in the storm, in the lot, in the moment he went overboard. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Not to the direction you choose, not to the ship that carries you away, not to the sea that swallows you, not to the strategies you build to manage the distance between yourself and what God has asked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it the message that I tell you. The second time, the same command, the same city, the same God. Nothing had changed about the assignment. Only Jonah had changed, and even then, the change was not yet complete. It was just enough. And Jonah arose and went to Nineveh, according to the word of the Lord. 7 words in English. A world of transformation beneath them. He went. This time he went. Nineveh was an exceedingly great city. Jonah began to enter it, going a day's journey. And he called out, Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. 8 words. That was the message. Not a sermon, not a theological treatise. 8 words of warning. And something happened in Nineveh that stunned the ancient world, and still stuns careful readers today. The people of Nineveh believed God. The entire city, not just a few sympathizers, not a small reform movement. The city. They called for a fast. They put on sackcloth, from the greatest to the least of them, the text says, from the palace to the streets. And the word reached the king of Nineveh, the most powerful man in that empire. And he rose from his throne. He removed his royal robe. He covered himself with sackcloth and sat in ashes. And he issued a decree: let everyone turn from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hands. Who knows? God may turn and relent and turn from his fierce anger, so that we may not perish. Who knows? God may turn. This king, ruler of the most feared empire on earth, surrounded by the architecture of conquest, sat down in ashes and said, who knows? Maybe mercy is still possible. And when God saw what they did, how they turned from their evil way, God relented of the disaster that he had said he would do to them, and he did not do it. The greatest revival in the book of Jonah does not happen in Israel. It happens in Nineveh, among the enemies, among the people Jonah most wanted to see destroyed. And this is where the story enters its most uncomfortable chapter. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry, not surprised, not confused, angry. And here, finally, Jonah explains why he ran. He prays again, but this time the prayer is not from the belly of a fish. It is from the edge of a city that did not burn, and it is the most honest, most troubling prayer in the book. O Lord, is not this what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disaster. Read that again. Jonah ran from God not because he was afraid God would fail, but because he was afraid God would succeed. He knew exactly who God was. He knew the character of the Lord, gracious, merciful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, and he did not want that mercy extended to Nineveh. He did not run because he doubted God's power. He ran because he trusted God's mercy, and he hated the idea of it reaching his enemies. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. A prophet of God, sitting outside a city that just repented, asking to die, because God was too merciful. God's response is a question. Is it right for you to be angry? Jonah does not answer. He goes out of the city, builds a shelter, and sits down in the shade to see what will happen to it. He is still waiting, still hoping, perhaps, that judgment will come after all. And God prepared a plant. It grew up over Jonah to give him shade from the sun, and the text says Jonah was exceedingly glad because of the plant. He is more grateful